Welcome, quality professionals. This is ASQ Storytime, brought to you by ASQ's Team and Workplace Excellence Forum. I'm Norm Howe, Chair-elect. Also with us is Jeff Vieira, Chair of our Team and Workplace Excellence Forum, and Wesley Casella, our Secretary. And so why stories? Why are stories important? Well, you know, we at ASQ are all about data, logic, and facts. Who needs stories, right? Well, fact is that stories are fun, and that's reason enough right there. But in addition to that, all those facts, data, and logic, they really don't do anything unless you have a human being present to actually affect something and make something happen. Stories tie all that data and logic together in a way that gives them meaning. And so they can be remembered. And so the people have a reason for taking action. And here's an example. Many years ago, there was a committee from the Canadian government who went out to a native tribe on the northwest coast of British Columbia. And what they told that tribe was that despite the fact that they had been living in that area for thousands of years, that they no longer owned the land. The delegation from the Canadian government waved a piece of paper at these people and said, "You no longer own this land. It is now owned by the Canadian government." The tribe's people were speechless. Finally, one of the elders said, "If you own this land, where are your stories?" So you see, a story can wrap an awful lot of context into a very small package. So I'm going to start the ball rolling here by picking randomly somebody to start the first story. And what I would like is for the storyteller to introduce themselves, basically name, rank, and serial number. And then we'll get right into the story. At the end, we're going to ask you to participate in a little survey where we pick the best stories for humor, what I'm going to use tomorrow, and best educational thought. So we're just going to go ahead and start. I'm going to sort of randomly pick off the list here. And Amy, do you want to start?
Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. My name is Amy Sigler, and by day, I am the Global Compliance Manager at Benchmark Electronics, but in the evening, most evenings, not tonight, I am a tasting room lead at El Morro Vineyard. So what I am going to be talking to you tonight is about pouring wine during the pandemic. So here is another view of El Morro, this one during sunset. And yes, the sunsets really are this spectacular, sometimes even more so. And I actually started working at El Morro just before the start of the pandemic. We needed to do a large amount of landscaping to help improve and prevent flooding around our house. And we happened to have a world-class winery 8 minutes from our home, and they were hiring. So I thought, what better way to earn some money than go work at the winery that was just a few miles from my home. And as I got into my role at El Morro, I had a fantastic opportunity to really learn about wine. And just shortly after I started, though, the pandemic started and we had to transition quickly. So what we started doing was selling these mini flights. You can see those little bottles in front. Those were part of the reimagined how we served wine to guests. They could take the flights with them. They were sold with a plastic unlogoed wine glass, and they could take them home, learn a little bit about the wine, and then come back and buy a case or bottles. We'd pack it up and they'd take that with them as well. But at some point, we had to transition back to opening wine in the tasting room and serving it. And one of the things that really terrified me about working at a winery was actually opening the bottles. So you may have seen something like this on the internet where you use a key to open a bottle. Well, I don't want you to have to do that. So I am going to show you some tricks so that you can pour wine like a professional at home. So, and let's see. I don't have one of the old-fashioned winged uh, wine openers, but this one that I have right here actually came from my grandparents, and it is from Paul Masson. So if you remember, I will sell no wine before it's time. This is a very old, not antique looking wine bottle opener. And I have a bottle right here. And I was actually at a wedding. And one of the things that really frustrated me, aside from the fact that the wine was not very good, was that the people serving the wine actually broke the cork off and couldn't open the bottle because they didn't know what they were doing. So one of the tricks that I've learned from the tasting room manager is that, and this is actually a empty used bottle just to practice with. But if you can do 7 turns, that really is going to be about what you need in order to get the leverage that you need to get a cork out properly. So I've done about 7 turns here. Something else is you've got this step right here. And one of the things we use in the tasting room is actually opener that has a double step on it, which can be really helpful as well to give you the leverage that you need. With some of these smaller bottles, the winemakers might actually have a cork that's not the appropriate size. So that's something that you might need a little bit more leverage. But since this cork has already been removed, I can just, by holding this against the side here, pull this right out. It doesn't give you that satisfying pop that you might have if this was a real bottle of wine, but you can see the technique. If this was a dry red, what I would want to do is insert an aerator to allow, if I was going to serve it right away, to allow the wine to incorporate some more oxygen than you would be able to do by just pouring directly from the bottle. So now I have a real bottle of wine, and I'm going to very quickly here show you one more opener. And this one actually has something around the lip to allow you to get the foil off, but it's not really working for me. So I'm just going to take my knife here and go around the top so that we have a nice presentation. Ordinarily, I would not recommend using a cork pop for a small bottle like this. However, it's the only bottle I had handy with a cork, so I'm going to go ahead and open this for you here. And this is a lot of fun because we can go straight into the bottle, push down, and pull it right out. So that makes a really nice presentation. And delicious. So if you're ever in Wisconsin, I hope you'll come out and see us at Elmaro Vineyard, and hopefully I'll have a chance to pour you a glass of wine. And one of the final things that I want to leave you with is the philosophy of Elmaro Vineyard is enjoy your day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, randomly, Stephen Prevet.
Howdy. Well, I'm Steve Prevet. I'm an ASQ fellow. I currently teach for Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, including their much hated statistics course, which part of the story is to turning that course into something students like. But I want to follow the theme of being flexible in your life. If you asked me in fourth grade, I was going to be a civil engineer and go to Cornell. I ended up being a civil engineering student, went to Virginia Tech, went into the regimental band, the Heidi Tidies, ended up, well, my freshman year was painting drum heads, so I have a drum head left over from that. They now are computer printed, not as much fun as having to hand paint them. And I wrote halftime shows my senior year, so how many people here wrote halftime shows? To John Philip Sousa, since it was a military-style band. Now, originally, I was going to be in the Army Corps of Engineers, but I met a guy who was going nuclear submarines with Admiral Rickover. So I said, I think nuclear submarines much better than a pup tent. So I got my meeting with the Admiral Rickover, and who kind of, why does a civil engineer want in my program? So, but he accepted me. I ended up with a tour. I was in the Mediterranean for the Libya raid in 1986. But as the Cold War ended, it was kind of like I got transferred out to a torpedo facility to help them. And it turned out they had some quality issues. So it was helping with procedures, ended up being the total quality leadership coordinator, and had to read Dr. Deming's Out of the Crisis. And oh boy, that was a thick one. Then I left the Navy and got hired, since I was a nuke. I got hired at the Hanford nuclear site as a maintenance supervisor. They said, oh, you were on old submarines, and I was in an overhaul, which wasn't exactly career enhancing. They said, you'll love our old nuclear equipment in the high-level waste tank farms of Hanford, Washington. Oh, yes. 6 months into that, they said, well, you've got the, and in fact, I got an operations research degree, which is all things statistics in the Navy. Ended up getting assigned, my thesis was to analyze a certain weapon system they wanted to justification get rid of. Come to find out the system worked. I ended up with, out of a 100-page thesis, about a half a page and a top secret weapons manual on how to use the actual system. But anyway, so I'm in class, be a maintenance supervisor, and they say, oh, well, we're getting beat up for performance metrics. You know statistics. Yeah. Okay, well, we got these guys coming up who work with Dr. Deming. The government loves them. Just go in, do whatever they say, and keep the government off our back. So I attended a 2-day class with Phil Monroe and Bill Cooper, who were working with Dr. Deming. They taught statistical process control using Excel 4.0. And did that class and went, okay, fine, went back to my on-the-job training, being maintenance supervisor. At noon, when I was on swing shift, my wife wakes me up and says, Steve, your boss is on the phone. I'm like, my boss? I'm a manager in training. What? Get in here now and start making control charts. Well, apparently the contract and the government kept saying, these consultants say make statistical process control charts. And the contractor, my employer, said, we have nobody that knows how to do it. Well, at the Phil Monroe stood up and said, yes, you do, and his name's Steve Prevet. And I'm told my name went to the SES at the top of the site and back down in 4 hours with a phone call at noon saying, get in here and start making control charts. Now, that's my entire job description for 28 years. I was a civil engineer, I was a safety engineer, I was an environmental engineer, I was a quality engineer, and various other hey you type of, they didn't know what to call me. Had about probably 28 managers in 28 years. Now, I developed kind of a unique way of dealing with people in data, because this started in safety and quality and that. And I soon realized that only desperate people came to see me. I did get the back channel of, Steve, you know, we haven't invited you into this project because you are a quality, expletive deleted, something or other. And so it was like, okay, fine. Now they would burn up like 5 months of the 6 month schedule. And then at this 5th month they couldn't get it to work. Hey, Steve, we're assigning this project. Got 1 month to finish it. I did a lot of those projects they were desperate enough to finally ask for the help, but had a lot of fun with that. They decided to make me corporate. They moved me to Savannah River. And I've also been to Chalk River, Canada. If there's anybody who remembers Jimmy Carter and going up there for nuclear cleanup, he was in the Navy also. So, what was I, planning to be? A civil engineer, submarine officer, or maintenance supervisor? You kind of have to go with the flow sometimes. Hop the opportunities as you get them. And quality, if you've got a good background. And I was also a nuke. Now, I should pan my camera around. I have a big model railroad here. I got called by a headhunter from Dallas who said, I got an operations research job we're interested in for you. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And it finally comes out to be it's the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad to be an operations researcher analyst for their traffic patterns. I'm like, I don't think I could have my hobby. You can see a little corner of the railroad up there. My hobby is designing operating sessions. I even talked to a statistics professor about how to operate a model railroad. I gave a clinic at a national convention to a standing room, 100-person crowd on statistics and model railroading. Now that's got to be a unique combination of topics. How to analyze the traffic flows you're trying to simulate. I got roped into teaching for Southern Illinois University at Carbondale remotely. Great thing. I've been teaching classes on cruise ships remotely. The connections are good enough now. So, but finally, a lot of the senior people who supported me in the job I was doing, and some contracts ended. So they kind of told me a year ago, well, Steve, and I'm 62 at the time, and we don't have another contract for you. We're putting you on leave of absence. I looked at the 401ks. I hate to look at my 401k today, but the 401ks look pretty good. So I said, well, forget this leave of absence. I'm just retiring. So I have the Southern Illinois University. I had been teaching a course a statistics course, brought in Dr. Deming's red bead experiment, a lot about the system profound knowledge, the 14 points, a lot of practical stuff. And the students really got to like the course. So many of them were working day jobs. And like, I got to do this red bead experiment at work. That's a whole nother story. I have a video on ASQ about Deming. And so at this point, I'm having fun teaching college and playing with my train. We just did an operating session today with about 6 people running a full-blown schedule. Can I get a shot of this? Yeah, we even have a timetable and a schedule and train order forms and the whole works. So that means, so the story is, yes, I fully believe in context. I also got involved with human performance and a lot of that, but it's not just the data, it's a story, and you got to be flexible. And only desperate people visit statisticians.
Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate it. Okay, let's, Jeff Vieira, how about you?
All right. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Vieira, the chair of ASQ's Teammate Workplace Excellence Forum, and I'm very happy to be with you today. I'm going to share a story from several years ago when I was running industrial engineering for a major supply chain distributor in the middle of a McKinsey and company transformation, which desperately needed to find bottom line savings. I data mined their labor management system, which I ran to identify productivity opportunities. One day, my boss, who had previously been one of the leaders we'd been working closely with in identifying and quantifying these opportunities, appeared at my desk out of the blue. "Come with me," he said. It wasn't a request. I was brought up to his new office, where one of his peers was waiting. He too had worked with me on this effort, and like my new boss, when the opportunities were reviewed with his boss and the lead partner from McKinsey, he too had developed amnesia as to where these numbers came from when discussing the budget for the coming year. After some rather cold pleasantries, they proceeded to play good cop, bad cop with me. Jeff, you provided a bunch of productivity opportunities with significant potential savings based on what you found in the labor management system data. This amounts to around 25% of the company's entire transformation portfolio. Guilty as charged, I said, wondering where this was heading. We've been working on this effort for months now. The two executives looked at each other, then at me. We don't believe these numbers are valid. There's no way the opportunity is that big. We can't possibly sign up for these savings in the budget, but McKinsey and the CFO think we should, based on your analysis. We need you to be a team player here. I said nothing and waited. My boss filled the awkward silence, his eyes boring into mine. The vice president of operations isn't happy with these numbers, and when he's not happy, we're not happy, and you're not happy. You need to change them. Good cop chimed in. Fix the numbers and we'll remember you were a team player. Let's make a deal. They waited while I considered what was behind door number one. Haven't we reviewed the analysis multiple times on calls with my former boss? Didn't you yourselves sign off on them over the phone a few weeks ago? If this were going to be an issue, why didn't you invite me to the budget discussion so we could talk it over before going in front of the senior executives? They shifted in their chairs but didn't say anything. I've checked and rechecked the numbers. I've used the most conservative assumptions at each juncture. At your request, I visited different sites to confirm them and they held up. What is wrong with the numbers? I'll correct them. Just show me where they're wrong. Good cop leaned forward. That's what we need you to tell us. The silence dragged on as I looked each of them in the eye. No deal. I can't do what you're asking without compromising my integrity. They backed off. We're not asking you to do anything of the sort, my boss said while looking sideways at Good Cop. We're just asking you to fix the numbers. They were clearly not happy, nor was I. The next couple of weeks were bad ones. I felt isolated, an enemy on the team, no other description fits. Pointed out that I was in a precarious position and opposing my boss's boss could only end one way. Someone had obviously told her what was going on. I hadn't told a soul at work. I felt like a prisoner awaiting execution. Still, I tried to carry on, doing my work as best I could. I thought of my wife and children. I was pushing 50. I'd never been unemployed in my life. What would I do if I lost my job? How'd I support them? How could I keep our home? I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think about anything else. I just waited for that axe to fall. And then my boss came for me again. Come with me, he said, appearing at my desk. I need to talk to you. I followed him to his office, my dread building. Due to the company's financial situation, we've had to make changes. You'll no longer have a director title or a team, and we'll report to one of my directors. We'll have to cut your salary and bonus. We want you to focus exclusively on the maintenance of the labor management system. There is an option for a separation package, but we don't even need to discuss that. We'd better discuss it, I said quietly. As I reviewed the contents of the package, I thought about all I'd been through with that company. 6 weeks into the job, I'd called my wife, who had been back at home preparing the house for sale, and told her I'd made a horrible mistake. My former boss had taken to calling me up first thing in the morning, screaming profanity at me. It was his way of dealing with the stress and politics of the home office, which the field referred to as the snake pit. I thought about how I'd been so frightened of losing my job that I'd skip my mother's funeral in order to speak at an important company conference. I thought about all the lying and backstabbing there. Mostly I thought about the honor wall at my alma mater, the Air Force Academy, and what was written on it. I'm a no, I told him. I'll take the package. He was stunned. He'd been sure I'd accept the demotion, the woodshedding, and do the dirty work which would allow him to avoid pushing for bottom line benefits. You'd better take 24 hours before making a final decision. I knew my wife would support me. There was no need. Our last discussion was very strange. Do you have any advice for me? My boss asked, clearly nervous. After all, I was the only person in the company who knew the labor management system. We thought you would stay. We don't have a plan B. I smiled. Yeah, I've got some advice. Next time, have a plan B. I walked out of his office in the full knowledge that the fear was all his now. Thank you for your time and attention.
Oh, that was great. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Let's see. Do we have Paige Reno with us?
Paige and Denise are both unable to make it this evening. I think that Quentin and Susan.
Let's go with Susan.
Susan, are you here? If you're having trouble unmuting, put something in the chat.
In the meantime, Quentin. Is Quentin with us? Quentin Wilson. Okay. Well, in the meantime, I'll pick, here's somebody here, Norm Howe. Oh. All right, Norm, you're on.
Tomatoes
Okay.
ready, people.
For some of you who may know me, by the way, I just want to proceed this story with a little explanation here, a name that will show up. Andy's Bar is actually a bar that was down the street, kind of a greasy spoon bar down the street from the plant that I worked in. And people would go to Andy's Bar after shift, have a few drinks before they went home. Maybe they went before shift, we didn't know. But so just so you know. And so I started out life as a research chemist and very quickly got moved into production management at a pharmaceutical company, having absolutely zero idea how to manage people, especially hourly workers. Fortunately, had a great boss who was a great mentor, and he said to me coming in the door, he said, listen, we need to make sure that this being a pharmaceutical plant, of course, that if there are any problems that show up, we need to make sure that people don't fear bringing this information to us. And this was we had never heard of Deming, but that sounded okay to me. So not knowing anything else, I just kind of channeled what he tried to teach to me. Oh, the first week I'm on the job, I get the call you never want to get. It's the shift supervisor on day shift. Norm, Louis just dropped a wrench into the blender. Oh, that's not good because, folks, this is not the kind of blender you have on your countertop at home. This is a blender that's got a ton or two of material in it. And then I asked the next question, how did we find out about this? Thinking that somebody had turned on the blender agitator and we're going to be down for 6 months. No, Louis had dropped a wrench in the blender and Louis told us. Okay, fantastic. So at that point, I said, listen, and the supervisor said, we've got the agitator locked out and we're fishing the wrench out now. And I said, great. What I want you to do is I want you to get Louis and a couple of maintenance techs, and I will meet you in the conference room in the plant. Hung up the phone. And then I did 10 deep breaths. You need to flush all the anger out of your system. You never want them to see you angry. That's what my boss had told me. Okay, I go up there. There's Louis. There's the two maintenance techs and the shift supervisor. Again, channeling my boss. Louis, did you feel unsafe while this happened? Was there any safety issues? I knew the answer to that question because we had done the safety review. He said, no, Norm, I didn't feel unsafe at all. But that's a lousy system that we have there. It's built to create errors, and it happened to me. I said, Louis, I understand what you're saying, but let's think about how we can prevent this from happening again. And we spent quite a bit of time trying to figure it out. Nobody had any, and then Louis was the one that came up with the idea. He said, why don't we get a piece of stainless steel wire and weld it to the handle of that wrench and weld the other end of the wire to that I-beam over there. And then if anybody drops it, it's not going anywhere. Louis, that's a great idea. It was a pokey-okey idea. We'd never heard of pokey-okey at the time, but it sounded good to me. It didn't take any training. It was dirt cheap, and it was going to work. I said, that's what we're going to do. And as we walked out of the room, I'm looking at Louis, and I could still feel something's not quite right. Louis is looking very apprehensive there. And now, normally I am a very planning kind of a guy. I'm not extemporaneous at all. But something came over me, and my mouth just blurted out, Louis, are you going to be at Andy's bar after shift today? He looked at me and he said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, Louis, if you're going to be there, I'm going to be there too. I'd like to buy you a drink. And he said, well, I'll check with my wife. And I said, okay, Louis, but I hope you're there because I'm going to be there. Well, you know, we didn't have the internet in those days, but man, I'm telling you, this thing went viral around the plant. And by the time I got over to Andy's bar, everybody was packed in there. The standing room only. I walked in, it was kind of dark, looked around, didn't see Louis. And then the door opened and in comes Louis. Louis, good to see you. What are you drinking today, Louis? Says, oh, I guess I'll have a beer. Okay, bartender, 2 beers. I paid for the 2 beers. I handed one to Louis and I said, thanks, Louis. And you couldn't really see very well in there, but I swear money changed hands when this happened. And we talked for a while, and then, you know, I had some things, a bunch of stuff to do, and I decided to kind of slip out the door. And as I was threading my way to the door, I'm walking behind one of the operators. He didn't see me. He didn't know I was there, but I could overhear him. And he said to his friend, I never seen a place like this before. You F up and the boss buys you a drink. So, and this whole thing kind of took off, you know, and other people started seeing places where we could put in, we called them MacGyvers. We didn't have the name Pokeyoki at the time. But here's the thing. From time to time, it was my responsibility to tour customers around the plant. And often as not, we'd get up to the area where the blender was, and customer would look at that wrench that was welded onto that wire and ask, what is that? What are you guys doing with that? And if I was lucky, Louis would be in the area. And I'd say, hey, Louis, you got a minute? Customer's got a question about your idea. You should have seen Louis straighten up when he'd come over and tell that customer about his idea. I wish I'd been on commission. I sold a lot of product that way. I'd be rich by now. That's my story. Okay, let's see.
I just add to that story a little bit. I don't know how many of you know of Dr. Russ Akoff. Dr. Deming referred to him a lot. He was a professor at the Wharton School of Business, and he did some consulting. He said at Alcoa Aluminum, he was with some workers. They had all worked on an improvement because aluminum foil kept tearing in some manner as it was being made in this aluminum mill. And before the dinner, Dr. Akoff gathered the guys together and said, okay, now level with me. How long have you known about this fix? They said, 20 years. Well, why didn't you ever tell management that this was the fix for this problem? You know, Russ Akoff was brought in to lead this big team and come up with a fix. I said, well, the bastards never asked us.
Yeah, I wish I had $1 every time that happened. So, Elizabeth.
Hi, everybody. I'm kind of your newest person in this area. I'm rather new to ASQ, but I am not new to this philosophy, model, and thought process. I am the 12th secretary, so I am lucky enough to work with Jeff and Norm, and we welcome you to this quarter's event, and we hope that you'll join us for others. With that said, here's my story. I kind of mishmashed the two topics for the evening, driving out fear and quality life after the pandemic. I fear that mine will not be nearly as entertaining as everybody else's, but it will be informative. So the topic of my quick short story is driving out fear due to illness. It has a happy ending, but so last year, I, as the founder and CEO of my firm, found out that I had cancer. And that, as anyone can imagine, created some fear. The work that my firm does is work with relation to process, policy, and procedure with an eye toward culture. Basically, what we're doing is we're mining the solution to organizational problems from the people who are doing the jobs. And as such, my firm, our service is what we need to always be focusing our quality on. And so not only was I concerned about my health, but I was concerned about my business. And I'm not just the leader, I'm a team member. I need to pull my weight as well as everybody else that I work with. So I was really, really concerned that I wasn't going to be able to bring my best to the table, bring my energy to everything that needed to be done. And I wasn't going to be able to be the leader and the teammate that I'd always prided myself in being. So I immediately, dove right into fear of being sick, finding out that I wasn't as capable as I was. And sitting in that fear for a while made me start to think about the different resources that I have. Some of the resources were the people on my team, and I was afraid to ask them for help. Some of the resources that I had were a little easier to bring into my world, and that means that it was my books. I am a lover of books. I find deep comfort in being able to either research or remind myself of excellent topics. And so I went through my bookshelf to see what could give me some reminders about, kind of like the old saying, the cobbler's children have no shoes. I was stuck in a place where I couldn't see how to keep my culture intact and maybe pull back on some of my processes and focus on the pieces that were most productive and were going to help us the most, instead of looking at everything that I thought I had to do on my plate. Now, one of those really helpful books that I turned to happens to be written by one of our dear friends. And I found much comfort in it because it reminded me that culture is everything. And the culture of my firm is everything, and reminded me that I hired people who were capable and kind and considerate and professionals that I could surround myself with. So the fear of asking my teammates for help, seeming vulnerable, seeming less than, feeling less than, I was able to do enough research and kind of steep myself in the many practices that leaders must go through when they're finding themselves in a vulnerable spot, and employ and deploy my communication skills. So I really dug deep in order to go into relationship development mode and ask people what they could proactively do to help us keep the business afloat and our clients serviced and satisfied, if not delighted. So beyond asking for help, which was scary, I then started thinking about, what about self-care? What can I do that's different than I've been doing previously, so that I can start to build the energy back up as I get healthier, to continue to maintain what we currently have, and then think in the future for building back up to a full funnel and a full list of clients and a full book of work. Again, turning to my favorite little book and reminding myself that I was able to really depend on the people around me, and to take some time for myself wasn't greedy and it wasn't slothful. It was actually doing something that was carefully measured and productive for the overall environment at that moment and into the future. It was very helpful. And then so when I returned to work, it was uncomfortable knowing that I wasn't going to be able to, put in 8 and 12-hour days, that I was going to start out at 2 and 3-hour days. But with that discomfort and employing some of the measured steps and processes that I'd thought about and then needed to implement along the way, I built every day on top of each other with a little bit more of a feeling of success. I felt successful because I defined success in small, measurable bites. And I reported those measurable bites. I held myself accountable by talking to my teammates, which was, again, relationship development. So if I'm making sense, what you should be kind of envisioning in your mind is that I have these concentric circles of fear, and then on top of that, relationship building, and on top of that, knowledge building, and on top of that, implementation. So as we fast forward through the months, today it's actually 9 months since my surgery, and I'm cancer-free. My team is intact. We are bringing one more person on board as of next week. We've built our book. All of that is to say that if I wouldn't have driven fear out by engaging with the people that I work with, understanding that sickness, illness, challenges like a pandemic happen in the workplace, given myself grace and asked for grace from the people around me, with a team that was already stellar, having high caliber talent people in their seats, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I wouldn't have the time to participate with Jeff and Norm and all of you here in the ASQ community, dare I say family now. And I'm really grateful for all of the opportunities that taking some time to identify, acknowledge, embrace, and let go of fear have given me over this last year. So that is my 2-minute, non-funny, but well-intended story.
That was great. And it's, you know what it is, Elizabeth, it's a mix. It's a mix of structure that we at ASQ were all familiar with personal human support. And it's a wonderful mix. It really is.
And a tremendous ad for a wonderful book. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you for writing it, Jeff.
Elizabeth, you may be interested in the book Turn the Ship Around by another submarine guy by the name of David Marquette. He has some really good leadership videos and a lot about developing people. David Marquette, Marquet. His primary book is Turn the Ship Around.
Thank you.
He's got a very good YouTube page, very personable guy, and talks a lot about he changed things. A submarine skipper is like, dive the ship, and instead he wanted the junior officer to say, I intend to dive the ship, and these are the conditions, and this is what we're to do, and blah, 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 blah. And then the captain just say, very well. So he was a lot about, in fact, probably only working 2 or 3 hours a day, you may have had an opportunity to actually have to turn over control to your subordinates. So it's a very good story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd
We're
like
not
to
comfortable with that kind of thing. We,
I'd like to
meaning
welcome
us,
anyone else who's joined us who maybe didn't sign up to speak, but who would like to share a story.
Come on in, the water's fine.
And if you're having trouble unmuting, just type in chat and I can do that for you.
well, what did you folks think about this? If anybody wants to jump in and tell a story, or how did this go? What did you think? How did this feel for you?
Wine was
All
great.
good for me. I like wine. Wine is always a good thing.
Talk about some news you can use, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna go pop a cork right now.
The
Hey,
stories
that
were
sounds
interesting.
great.
All right, well, we were planning on doing a little survey here, and we had, let me, we had some questions we'd like you folks to vote on. We want to exclude from our survey or our poll the people that are actually officers in TWEF. That being me, of course, and Elizabeth and Jeff Vieira. But what do you folks think? What was we'd like to ask you, what was the funniest story? What was the most educational? And what thing gave you information that you could use tomorrow? Or maybe what we should do is just send a copy of the book to all the people that were not officers.
Hey, now.
I would love to receive a book, additional information. I'm signed up for my CMQOE certification. I take that test next month. I kind of need some references for study materials so that I can get completed. So if anyone can send me any kind of information, that would be fabulous for me, and I would really appreciate it.
Well, you asked so nicely, Christina. Of course, we'll put you down. We just need how do we get people's addresses, because we need the mailing addresses to send out.
I'm gonna follow up.
I can verbally give it to you guys, or you guys can email me, whatever
Well,
works.
hold on. I think Elizabeth has a game plan.
I'm gonna email everybody after the event, and Amy, Stephen, and Christina, I will be asking you for your addresses, so we're not sharing them on this recorded message that everyone can hear at a different date.
That's why
I
Elizabeth keeps
appreciate
us
that
straight.
because everybody's dog's best friends, girlfriends, cat, sweetheart has my phone number, my email. So I really appreciate that.
Have you thought about a warranty for your vehicle?
Oh my gosh, I cannot get. Oh my gosh, the amount. Oh my gosh, I have a warranty on my vehicle. It is not expired. Thank you very much.
And Stephen, I just want to say that layout is super impressive. I've got a 14-year-old son who is super into trains. We're just starting on a layout in the basement for him, and my goodness, tell me that took about a weekend to do.
That actually, the layout started in 1982.
Oh,
And yeah, it actually moved the original two pieces. I calculated moved around the globe a couple times because we did several coast to coast moves. I'm going to put on, I have a website. I'll put that on the chat there. If anybody really you can take there's employee training on how to be the dispatcher, how to be an engineer, how to be.
look at that. Wow.
And
Great. If you could email me that information, my husband loves trains. We've talked about putting up something around our ceiling for the choo-choo trains to go around. It would be awesome.
okay.
And
It
scale.
is,
Wow.
well, I
Wow.
put in the chat window, BHBF, it's the Burn Hills and Big Flats. That's a whole nother story as how that came about in this name, but bhbf.weebly.com. So it's one of those
Okay,
free Weebly websites.
that's great. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah,
So we will send a recording, a link to the recording out to everybody that participated here. And hopefully you can pass that on to your friends and let everybody know. If anybody is interested in helping us at the Team Workplace Excellence Forum, we really appreciate it. So you can get a hold of me and let me know. We also have a podcast that we do. Jeff, want to just say a few words?
Yeah, if you like talking about fear in the workplace, the post-pandemic world, talking about culture, talking about all those wonderful things, please look for the Fearless Workplace. It's out there on your major podcast providers. And every couple of weeks, we sit down with someone to talk about a different aspect of fear in the workplace and how to counter it. That's our major theme for this year on the Team of Workplace Excellence Forum. And we're trying to live up to Deming's point that we need to drive fear out of the workplace in order to really accomplish anything in terms of continuous improvement. So we're trying to make some real inroads on that this year. If you go out to myasq.org and look for the Team of Workplace Excellence Forum portion of that, you'll find that we got great content, mainly written by Norm and Elizabeth because I'm late. But if you check that out, terrific discussions on there about all things related to this. So there's a lot to see, a lot to pick up on, and the more of us that participate, the more good stuff is going to be out there for everyone else. So please take Norm up on the offer. We would love to see you out there. And the great thing about ASQ right now is technical divisions are free. You can sign up for as many as you like, and we think you ought to sign up for ours because it is uniquely focused on the human side of quality. Thank you.
That is
Appreciate
fabulous.
that.
That's everything that I needed to hear. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good night.
See you next quarter.
Thank you.
Yes.